You're checking in with the doctor for the greatest fantasy baseball podcast in the world, starring your hosts, Dr. Fantasy.
I'm ready to rock and roll today.
And Rydawg.
Harrison masturbator.
Welcome to Doc and Dog, your fantasy baseball geniuses, presented by the Fantasyholics.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Doc and Dog, presented by the Fantasyholics. My name is Jordan Jaika, aka Dr. Fantasy, and I'm here with my co-host Rydawg. And Rydawg, we are talking some Houston Astros baseball today. How are we feeling about the Astros?
Feeling all right about them, Doc. Let's talk about some Astros baseball. Woohoo!
Yeah, no, and we haven't really talked about this, but do you think that, a lot of people have this conversation, but do you think that the cheating's going to impact their fantasy value at all for the upcoming season?
That is something we haven't really talked about. That's the thing is, they didn't need to cheat, though. That lineup is completely stacked. All the guys they have are practically A-plus talent for the most part. It's tough because a guy like Bregman hits 40 home runs and 120 RBIs. I mean, those stats in general are unrealistic to a point in general. I think going forward, the stats might decrease a little bit, but not at much at all to a point where it's going to impact a guy like Bregman or a guy like Springer or a guy like Alvarez, who are just going to fall off the face of the earth. I think their value will still stay the same to an extent.
Yeah, no, and I think Bregman's a good example of that. So that'll segue us into our, we'll go over the lineup here. But once again, this is presented by the Fantasyholics. If you don't already, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Fantasyholics1. Make sure you check out our new website, thefantasyholics.com. And in this MLB mini-series, we are breaking down the lineup, the rotation, a few impact prospects, and as I already mentioned, we're discussing the Astros today, so we will jump right into their lineup. And leading off for them is one of their outfielders, George Springer. He's currently going pick 42, and I'm going to let you start off with this one because I know you like yourself some Springer.
I do like myself some Springer, and he's like the one guy out of like the whole scandal nonsense. He's like the one guy that has stayed as quiet as he possibly could. He didn't go out and make an outcry like Correa did about defending every single part of it. And that's like the veteran mentality, I guess you could say Springer has. I mean, and his stats in general have always been consistent. He's the one guy that I don't see that could decline his stats at all. At pick 42 for a fantasy standpoint, I think that's pretty good value considering he's a 300 hitter. He can hit 30 home runs and he can go for 80 to 100 RBI. So I like him a lot this year.
Yeah, no, and we've talked before about good situations. Obviously, this is a good lineup. He's batting at the top of it, so he's going to score, a ton of runs. The one thing I will say I'm a little concerned with is I loved him when he was coming up, and last year was probably his best year in the majors. I'm interested if he can put up those numbers consistently, and if he can, he's definitely I'd say it's a fair value at number 42 for him. He falls for me into that Starling Marte category that I think you like a lot more than me. You're going to get consistent production, but I'm a big upside value guy, so I think it's fair for him. I wouldn't say, oh my gosh, that's a steal, that's unfair. I think it's just fair value for him, and you're going to get good numbers. So if you're looking for that consistency, I think that's a good spot for him.
Yeah, for sure. And he offers that leadoff spot where he does it all. If you need like a leadoff home run to like jump ahead early in the game, he's the guy to do it too. So there's just so much you can like about Springer. And last year was definitely his best year. 2017, he had somewhat similar stats, but I think he had more RBIs last year, maybe by like 10. And he had probably 3 or 4 more home runs. We'll see if he can repeat it this year, Doc.
Yeah, for sure. Number 2 in that lineup is probably the most controversial name from the scandal, Jose Altuve, playing second base for him. He's currently going pick 32, which is the second baseman off the board. That just feels very high to me. I'd rather wait 10, 15, 20 picks later and get Hayura, Albies, any of those young. And we've talked about it before. There's a lot of guys I like later in the draft, like Lourdes Gurriel. I might argue that I like McNeil more later, almost 80 picks later after Altuve. It just feels really high for me. I mean, once again, you're going to get consistency. He's put up consistent numbers for a while, a good average, hit over 30 home runs last year. So it just feels high to me. I think there's other second basemen that you can wait a few rounds and get that have more upside and that can provide more in the short term as well.
Altuve is a guy out of like all the high-end second basemen, right? The Albies, the Haruas, all the high-end second basemen. He's just the one guy I don't like. I don't know what it is. I think it was not last year, but the year before. He had a really, really down year. Mm-hmm. And like last year, correct me if I'm wrong, but his stats were like skyrocketed from the 2018 season to the 2019 season. Yep. And let's not forget, he's on the wrong side of 30 now. He's 31 or 32. I mean, I remember him being called up. I remember that like it was yesterday. Just a kid with all the ambition in the world, wanting to succeed in the game. And now you can't even look at him without having like a cringe on your face. And it's bad. I mean, for a fantasy standpoint, I don't even want him at pick 32. Not because of what he did, but that's just high.
Yeah, I'm just surprised, too, with all the cheating allegations. I'm surprised he's going over Albies and Harua and all those guys. So that was a little surprising when I was going through the ADPs. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's really high.
Yeah, for sure.
Number 3 listed in their lineup right now is outfielder Michael Brantley. Probably not one of the bigger names in this lineup, but he's really under the radar. He's a guy that hits right around 300, high 280s, high 290s, right in that range. He hit a good number of home runs last year. And I don't know, especially being in the middle of the lineup, he has a great opportunity to drive in runs, score some runs ahead of Bregman, Gurriel, Alvarez. He's currently going pick 117. He is older now. I believe he's 34. I think 117, he fits perfectly into that middle round outfielder category that we've talked about with Laureano, Conforto. The list goes on and on. So I think that's good value for him. I personally like to take younger guys with more upside and more to prove, but I can't argue with that spot, and it's definitely fantastic value.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a good value you can't ignore. At the third spot, you're hitting right in front of Springer and Altuve, and then you're hitting after Altuve and Springer, and then you're hitting before, like you said, Gurriel, Alvarez, and Bregman. So it's a really good spot for him to generate RBIs and runs. At pick 117, he is a little bit older. But I mean, at pick 117, if he's there, I wouldn't be opposed to taking him as my third or fourth outfielder. Mm-hmm. That's if I haven't locked up Springer yet.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that he's just one of those guys that with all the big names in this lineup, he goes under the radar and people say, I want Springer, Altuve, Bregman, even Correa, because Correa was the next great thing coming up. Bregman, I want all these names. But Brantley, I mean, he's been an all-star. He was really good with the Indians. He's just been really good with the Astros. So he's one of those names that he just kind of slides under the radar, and I think you can take advantage of that at 117.
Oh, for sure. I completely agree.
Then number 4 in that lineup right now is Alex Bregman playing third base for him. He also has shortstop eligibility. Currently going pick 17. I actually really like this value for Bregman, and you kind of alluded to it earlier. I mean, I think that his numbers might go down a tad, but when you look at his numbers throughout his career before this cheating scandal coming up through the minors, he's always mashed the ball. So I don't think that's going to change overnight just because of this scandal. I think he's a talented guy. I think he's one of the best hitters in baseball, obviously an MVP. So going pick 17, I actually really like that because I think if there was no cheating scandal, I think he would be a surefire consensus first-round pick. So you're getting a guy in the mid-second now just because of these allegations. So I really like that value for him, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I said his stats would go down, I wasn't talking a drastic. He was going to hit like 20. He's still going to hit 30 home runs. He's still going to have 80 to 100 RBIs. He's still going to hit for a high average. He's still going to drive in a lot of runs. So, 6-17, I would take him there for sure. It's great value. He should be a top 10 pick if it wasn't for all the scandal, as you said. That's a very good point, Doc. So, going forward, absolutely, it's tremendous value for. You're getting a guy that should be going in the first round. You're getting him in the late second. I would take that value all day.
Yeah, I agree. Number 5 in this lineup is, I think, the guy, except Josh Reddick and Maldonado, their catcher, going the latest in fantasy drafts. Number 5 is Yuli Gurriel for them, playing first base, going pick 163. I actually really like that value for him. I have him as my starting first baseman, I believe, in 2 leagues, which might seem a little crazy, but once again, this is a really strong lineup. The guy hit 30 home runs, batted right around 300 last year. He had a big year, and ever since he's been in the States, he's had a really successful career here. And once again, I think he just goes under the radar because of the lineup he's in. But if I can get my starting first baseman at pick 163 because I ignored it earlier in the draft, I don't have a problem with Gurriel, especially being in this lineup. 30 home runs, a good average. That average is key, and we've talked about this previously. It's not hard to find home runs in today's game, but if you can find a guy that hits for an average, that's critical. And Gurriel kind of checks all the boxes, so I'm a little surprised he's going that late, and I think that's great. I think he offers the best value overall in this lineup.
Yeah, for sure. And my thing about Gurriel, though, is he's going so late, and I think people look at his age, and that's like the only outlier you can really put to his whole name and his stats. It's like, oh, he's over 35. I don't want this guy anymore. The first baseman typically lasts a lot longer out of all the positions that people realize. If I need a first baseman at pick 160, I mean, and the Gurriel's there, that's tremendous value. Like you said, he checks all the boxes you need on the field and for what you would need in a first baseman. So why take one early when you could take one later?
Based on the pods that we've done so far, it sounds like we're going to have an all over 35 team between Nelson Cruz, JD Martinez, all these guys. But I mean, realistically, these are guys, I think a lot of them are more old school hitters that place a little more emphasis on plate discipline, having a higher average. And there's a lot to be said for that because average is, I just mentioned, it's hard to find in today's game.
It is, and those guys, those older guys, they're more wise to the point where they're not gonna swing at everything because they have so much more years in the field. They know what they're looking at. They're not gonna go swinging at something silly. They have plate discipline, tremendous eye for the ball. So, and if they're old, if my team's average is like 33, so be it.
Yeah. Number 6 in that lineup is Yordan Alvarez. They have him listed as their DH. He's probably going to get a lot of time there, but he has outfield eligibility. He's currently going pick 36. I've seen a lot of opinions that are kind of all over the board on him. I don't think last year was fluky. I've heard a lot of people say that was a fluke. He can't keep that level of production up. I mean, I think he's that elite of a hitter where he can keep that production up. The only thing that worries me this season, he's already got a knee injury. If that was to linger throughout the course of the season, I worry about that a little bit. With a delayed start to the season, I think he's one of those guys where it probably plays to his advantage because he can rest it up a little bit. But I actually think he's an absolute star. I think that he's going to be kind of like a JD Martinez level kind of hitter, just right around 300, 30 home runs, 100 RBIs, just consistently for years and years to come. He's only 22, so in dynasty leagues, I completely get why people reach on him. At pick 36, I think a lot of people would say that that's too high for him, but I've mentioned it before. I like upside, and I'm a little aggressive, and he's a guy to me that has top 10 talent as far as hitters go. So if I could grab Alvarez in the third, Bregman in the second, I feel like I'm getting 2 potential top 10 guys. So I personally like the value, but I understand the concerns that he can't keep that production up and that the knee injury may linger.
I can't say I'm not a Alvarez guy. I don't have him in any leagues, but I can't say I'm a hater either. I'm more of on the neutral side of Alvarez. He's a young guy. He's going to be a stud for sure. I think my only issue is I can't take a guy in the pick 30s that's batting 6 in the lineup. Yeah. Once Alvarez goes off, you're going to start getting into Correa, I guess he's an average hitter, but he's not what he was supposed to be, and he's not what he used to be either. Correa, that is.
Yep.
If it's a dynasty league, I'm all in for taking the value there. If it's a redraft, I may wait. Because I don't like the spot he's in the lineup. In my opinion, he's going to drive in runs, but he's not going to get the runs.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a fair point. I think one of the things I personally keep in mind, the Astros, when you actually look at their lineup, have dealt with a lot of injuries. Really everybody, Brantley, Altuve, Springer's had a few injuries. Gurriel's dealt with his share of injuries. So Alvarez realistically will probably get some at-bats higher in the lineup. But yeah, no, overall that's a good point. At number 6, it's not ideal. If he was number 4, I think in that lineup he would be even more of a slam dunk. But yeah, no, that's a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, oh yeah, for sure. That comes with the age that we talked about, that we discussed. You notice how so many guys get injured, but it's always the guys that are in the 32, 34 age range where their body starts to feel the wear and tear. And that's why you see guys like Stanton, you see guys like Cruz, and you see guys like even Martinez. I mean, you can't tell me the last time they played over 150 games.
Right.
I mean, but their stats are still there, though, at the end of the year. And it's mind-blowing to imagine those type of old veteran guys that actually did play over 150 games. I mean, their stats would be insane.
For sure. Number 7 in this lineup is a guy we've brought up a few times, just in passing, Carlos Correa, playing shortstop for him, currently going pick 98. And we've talked a lot about the shortstop class this year for fantasy purposes being really deep. And I think Correa is kind of the perfect example of that. And even though he hasn't lived up to the hype of what he was supposed to be, I think a part of that is he's dealt with injuries. But when he's healthy, I mean, he's been an elite hitter. It's just a matter of if and when he's healthy. So I love 98. I think you're getting a top 10 shortstop at pick 98. It's just a matter of you might want to have a good contingency plan. If you have Correa as your starting shortstop, make sure that you're taking a guy a few rounds later that is kind of your fallback option in case Correa is not playing. But I love 98. I think that you're getting great value there, and I love it.
Yeah, it's decent value. I mean, his average isn't what I would want it to be, though. I feel like his stats have kind of declined, and he's dealt with a lot of injuries, but he's only getting older now. He kind of reminds me of the Corey Seager. It's great value when they're healthy, but you can't trust them because they're never healthy. So they're never there on time playing in the field, it seems like. So like you said, you might want to grab a fallback option.
For sure.
I've just never been a Correa guy either. So I mean, I might be a hater.
You're a Correa hater.
I am.
Then bottom of that lineup is not quite as exciting. You have Josh Reddick in the back. I'm not sure exactly, and I've said this several times to other people. I'm not sure why he's plugging up a lineup spot for Kyle Tucker. And then behind him, you have Martin Maldonado, who's catching for him. So I don't really have much to say about Reddick or Maldonado. I'm not drafting either one of those guys. Kyle Tucker is currently going pick 193, so kind of later in drafts. And I think that's with the expectation that he's going to take over for Reddick. He just hasn't performed yet, and he might be one of those prospects with a lot of hype that doesn't end up performing very well. But I personally don't take Kyle Tucker in redraft leagues just because he doesn't have a defined role. I totally get it because he has the upside, and I can't argue with you if you do. But he'll probably bat later in that lineup. If you want to take them later, that's fine. I just don't like taking guys whose roles aren't defined. And it seems like they're pretty gung-ho on making sure Reddick gets playing time for whatever reason.
I mean, I can see why they are playing Reddick, though. This Kyle Tucker, he's really stunk it up in the minors as well. He hasn't really lived up to the hype at all. So, in a way, you can't blame them for playing Reddick. I mean, Reddick's fantasy value, he's not fantasy relevant. I think the only way Kyle Tucker's fantasy relevant is if you take him late in a dynasty league. But it's a tough situation. They're both not living up to the potential that the rest of the starting lineup consists of.
It's a very quick drop-off. We're talking about all-stars, and then we get to Josh Reddick, Kyle Tucker, and Martin Maldonado.
They have Robinson Cano, but I guess they decided to let him go.
Yep. Yeah, he's with the Rangers.
Oh, sweet.
I think that's it for their lineup then, so we'll hop into their rotation. Kicking it off, they have him listed number 5 right now, and I think it's just because of his injury, but I'm going to start off with him first. This is Justin Verlander. He's currently going pick 16 overall, right in that range. I think that's way too high for him. We've mentioned it already, and, the Astros do have some older guys on this roster now. But in Verlander, even though his statistics really haven't dipped, he's still pitched at an elite level. I I just think that's too high for him, especially considering he's 38 with a ton of injuries now. He's currently injured. Most likely with the delayed start, he will play this season and play the entire season if he's healthy. But the injury concerns are too much for me to take him in the top even third round, top 3 rounds with his age, even though he's still an elite pitcher. The injury concerns are too much for me.
Yeah, that's stupid. I'm not taking him either. I agree. It's stupid to have him ranked in the top 20. And there's no way in my mind would I ever take. I mean, they got him ranked 16 and they got Bregman ranked 17. And the age difference is like almost 14 years, you know?
Yeah, that's insane.
No way. I could get a pitcher later. And he's at age 38. Maybe in redrafts would I take him in like maybe the 20, 25 range. Or I mean, I may even wait till the 30 overall range. But he's 38. He's doomed to fall off. And when Verlander is going to fall off, it's not going to be slow. It's going to be quick. Like he's not going to go on forever.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then number 2 in that rotation right now is Zach Greinke. Another guy, he's 36 years old, currently going pick 56. And Greinke's been really consistent throughout the course of his career. In that 56 range, once again, it just feels kind of high for me. I'm not the biggest fan of taking those older guys in that range. That's just me. I'd rather have the younger Castillo, Paddock, the list go, Giolito, who I know you're not as high on, but I'd rather have any of those guys over Greinke. And I think it's just a matter of what your drafting style is. If you go for the high upside, I think Greinke is what he is at this point in his career. I don't expect him to return to that Cy Young form. I think he's a solid guy that's going to get you low 3, high 2 ERA, an innings eater, 200 innings, right around 200 Ks in that range. But I personally look for more upside. And the age for pitchers concerns me. I think hitters can deal with it a little more, and we've seen great examples of that with Nelson Cruz, Edwin Encarnacion even. He's declining now, but he's 40 years old, so it's got to happen at some point. But I think it concerns me more with pitchers, the wear and tear on their arms, and Greinke worries me as a top 5-round pick.
No, I agree. I mean, I guess the only thing that I would consider why I would take him at round 5, and not in a dynasty league. I'm talking strictly redraft on this situation because I don't think I could take Greinke, and then I couldn't take him to the top 5 rounds at all in a dynasty. But he doesn't have the injury history. It seems like he did in the past, but it seems like Greinke's always been consistent, even when he's on the field, as opposed to Verlander. There's always something going on with him. They're both old. I mean, and it's just crazy. You add up their age together. They're 74 years old combined.
Yeah.
I like Greinke though. He's an old school style pitcher.
Yeah.
But I don't know, for fantasy I pass. He's just too old for me.
You're looking at Soroka's future right there.
Damn right you are.
Number 3 in that rotation right now, and I'm going off my phone right now, so I apologize for looking down, but number 3 is Lance McCullers. He is going pick 180 right now. I think that's good value for him. I'm not as high on McCullers as other people are. When you look at his metrics, they just don't show he has elite upside. People kind of knocked him around. He has good control of his pitches. His pitches have nice movement. So he has some upside there. The only reason that I like him in 180 is just because he's on a really good team, and he's going to have a chance to get 15-plus wins in a full season just because of the team he's on. So I kind of temper my expectations because I don't think he has the elite upside that some people think he does. But at 180 and a good team, that's a perfect spot.
Yeah, I think it's a slam dunk when we talk about in value. They got rid of Cole. Obviously they didn't go after another high-end pitcher, so they have to see something in this guy. They're going to give him every opportunity in the world to succeed. I'm not a McCullers fan either, and he was definitely really, really highly scouted when he came up, and he was really, really high in ceiling. But I don't see it. I don't really think he's all that. I don't think he lived up to his name at all, that he was supposed to be the next big thing. But I pick 180. That's basically a droppable guy at this rate. So if he doesn't pan out in redraft leagues, you can just drop him.
Yep, definitely. The number 4 is Jose Urquidy, one of their better prospects, going to be in the rotation full time now. He was okay last year. He currently is going pick 214. He's a guy I think that has at 214. Once again, great organization. Well, I won't say great organization, great winning. They're going to be a good team. He's going to have a chance to get wins. He showed that he has some potential last season. I temper expectations once again. I think McCullers has pitched a few more seasons, obviously, than Urquidy here, but I think at 214 on a good team, once again, he has some K upside. He has some potential for some wins. He's a young guy. He's a guy that I'll target late in drafts.
Yeah, I agree. He's definitely got some he's got some upside for his age. I like him. I'll target him at the right pick.
For sure. Let's see, number 5, and this has kind of been a battle in spring training, but we'll talk about Josh James because I think he has the most upside of any of the 5 starters, or the guys that are competing for that 5 spot. So we'll talk about Josh James first. He's a guy, he has a ton. When you look at his metrics, he has a lot of elite stats. He has a very high K rate. His whiff percentage is very high, so batters struggle. But the biggest thing with him is he has absolutely terrible control. The Astros pitching staff has been known in the past few years to kind of help guys like this, and that's one of the reasons that I really like Josh James, is because I think that they can work with him on that control. I wouldn't expect him to be a Cy Young caliber guy this season because it's going to take a few years for him to really get his control under control. So but I like his upside. He's going pick number 240 right now, but he has a very high ownership percentage. So he's being drafted in one of the last rounds in most drafts. So I like him. I think he has some upside. It's just a matter if he can get that control under control, and if he doesn't, you drop him.
I agree. And Astros worked with Cole a lot prior, when he was with Pittsburgh, and his control was all over the place when he was with Pittsburgh. And the Astros helped get his career back on track. I mean, you could say the same that the Astros kind of helped Justin Verlander get his career back on track, because when he was with the last years in his contract with Detroit, Verlander's control, it was all over the place, and he was already an established veteran pitcher. So the control can happen to anybody at any age, really. It really can. You can have it for a couple of years, and then batters start figuring you out, and then you try new stuff, and then you get too fancy with it, and then it costs you in a couple of years. But I like Josh James. The Astros, if they're good for anything, it is helping pitchers find their control, getting the best out of them.
Yep, I agree. Then their closer this year, just wrapping up the pitching side of things, is Robert Osuna, currently going pick 74. We've said several times don't take a closer before pick 100. Osuna is going as one of the top few closers with good reason. He's on a good team. He's going to have a lot of opportunities. I'm not really targeting him. If he falls a few rounds, I definitely would. But, he's a closer. It is what it is.
Yep, he's a closer. You know how we feel about those no closers before pick 100.
Yeah, and I say that even more than I have in previous years, just because I saw a trend with a lot of leagues are really starting to switch to saves and holds as a category. And with that, I think it renders closers almost irrelevant. Like, there's leagues where I don't even draft a closer anymore, especially because there's going to be bullpen arms that come out of nowhere, and you're going to be able to pick guys up off the waiver wire. So I might use my last few picks on solid bullpen arms like Adam Ottavino, Familia, not as much, but Betances, some of the better bullpen arms I'll take within the last few rounds, because closers really don't matter anymore. So
I completely agree.
Then finishing it up with their farm system and impact prospects, Astros have a very weak farm system right now. It's currently ranked 28th overall. Obviously, their major league roster is it's a little loaded right now, so not many guys to speak of here. But I'll bring up a few names here. Forrest Whitley, who was very highly regarded, still is up there in the prospect rankings, has dealt with some injuries. We'll see if he gets a chance to crack the rotation. Once again, another guy with upside if he is able to ever crack that rotation, get his control under control. Urquidy's going to be up in the rotation. They have Abraham Toro. He's probably going to be on their bench for the most part. Plays multiple positions. If they have any injury concerns or any injuries that happen throughout the course of the season, that's probably one of the guys you might see and step in. They have a few other pitchers, Brian Abreu and Christian Javier. both very high K guys. They have strong upside. Just because that rotation is kind of full right now, I expect them to make their debuts in the bullpen at some point. So those are some names to look at, though, if they do. Because to me, if the Astros insert one of those guys into the rotation, I'm picking them up immediately just because of the situation. And usually I'm not the biggest fan of picking up rookies as soon as they get called up. But if they're in a rotation and with a team that's this strong, I will pick them up right away just because they're going to be able to get you wins from day one.
Oh, I agree. They're going to get you wins. They're going to get you quality starts for sure. And that's an interesting statement you got, because that's completely true in my opinion. You know, if you pick a young guy up, and it's usually never works. It works out about half the time, only if their potential's high. But you know, you have the best offense in baseball, arguably. You can't go wrong with any pitcher there, really, as long as the reward's there. The draft value, the pickup value is going to be insane. So you could probably grab your last couple pitchers from this farm system, guys like McCullers or guys like Forrest Whitley. I'm not the biggest Forrest Whitley guy, and it's mainly because injuries have messed that guy up a lot. And when he was healthy, his control was horrible, but you know, he's young though, so they can still work with it. And if he ever gets called up, I'm picking those guys up immediately.
Yep, I agree. Any other notes you want to make on the Astros today?
I think I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else either. So I want to thank everybody once again for tuning in. This has been Doc and Dog, presented by the Fantasy Holics. If you don't already, make sure you like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at FantasyHolics1, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a ton of content on there. Make sure you check out our new website. We're going on almost 3 weeks here since that launched. Almost 100 articles released in 3 weeks. So make sure you check that out. We have MLB content, NFL, NBA going up every single day. That's thefantasyholics.com. And thank you guys once again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.